Hey folks, welcome to chapter 8. It's going to be the skeletal system focusing on joints. We did chapter 5 and we skipped chapter 6 and 7 because you are going to cover those in the lab. So those are bones. So you do need to know those chapters for the lab exam. So this is basically, and then we also talked about the skeletal tissue, how bones grow and how bones heal. And chapter 6 is focused on axial skeleton, and that's for the lab exam. At least for the first exam, you'll need to memorize all the names of the bones, and then chapter 6 is I believe the appendicular skeleton. Chapter 7 is appendicular skeleton, which is referring to your upper limbs and your lower limbs, your arms and your legs. So you do need to know those chapters, and you can use those as resources in the lab. Okay, so chapter 8, that's still part of the skeletal system because just because you have bones doesn't mean that, it works. The bone needs to be connected to something, and it needs to be connected to other bones in order for movement to occur, and in order for you to create maybe a structure to protect the organs and things of that sort. So the fancy word for joint is articulation. Articulation means joint, and that's where the bone meets. If you have if you want to say arthritis, that's if you have swelling of the joints, then or inflammation of the joints, that's called arthritis. Itis word stands for inflammation, and the word arthro means a joint. Articulation refers to being joined together. Being joined together means you got two bones that are joined together, and we're going to have two kinds of skeletons in class, and that are going to be articulated. So you're going to have one that's all connected, it's going to be standing, and one kind of it's going to be in a rolling stand, articulated skeleton. And then you have the other type of skeleton that's going to be in a box. Those are the bones you're going to use for memorization, and those are the bones that are not joined together. So we have, I believe, 6 boxes of bones, and that's going to be random bones in there that are not connected, and to you know to get the articulated skeleton, those bones are joined together, and then that's how we use this term. And the images you see are numerous examples of articulations. So you got the skull bone here, and another bone here is connected to the clavicle, and there's one middle of your vertebrae here, and they're going to have cartilage, so that's going to connect two vertebrae together. And then this one is with the growth plate here, and that's considered to be a phyphysis, if you remember that. So you got a joint that which is a growth plate, and then you have the metaphysis that's actually going to be considered two bones. So you have the epiphysis and then you have the metaphysis. This is showing some more of the sternum being joined together. So let's talk about the 4 kinds of bones. Not bones, sorry, 4 kinds of joints, classification of joints. So we're going to focus on this lecture. The first one is going to be the bony fusion. So we have 4 classifications of joints, and these are the ones we're going to focus on in this lecture. First one is called bony fusion. Second one is called the fibrous joint. And third one is called cartilaginous, and last one is synovial. So this is going to be the 4 ways that you can describe joints based on structure. So these are structural classes. Let me write that for you. Structural classes. A structural class. Here's a U, structural class. So bony fusion is when the things they fuse together, bones they fuse together. So you can't see the line, means they're going to be bone that has been fused together. So let me see here. So when there is a baby, you can feel the soft spot here, and this part of the skull is not joined together here to the frontal bones. But over time, they become joined together. That's a bony fusion, and then you kind of see just one bone here. So if you look here, these are not bony fusion. You can still see the line there. So cartilaginous is obviously going to be when there's cartilage between the two bones. Synovial is the special one. That's the one that has fluid, synovial fluid. So that's going to be structure. And then the fibrous is would be considered these sutures here, the fibers joining together. That's a synovial example. And this is cartilaginous. There's cartilage in between. Another way to to describe the joints are based on movement. So do they move? Do they not move? So some of these move, some of them don't move. So you know that they overlap with this category. So these are joint classifications. This is going to be put the joints into classification based on movement. So I'm going to say movement classification. Okay. So each of these joints, let's talk about, they either move or they don't move or they slightly move. So the first one we have is called synarthrosis. The word syn here means, SYN means together. Arthro stands for joint. So if you have two bones that are they're so, tight together that they're joined so tightly together, they're not going to move. Examples of these bones are your teeth. Your tooth is a bone, and then the mandible or maxilla is another bone, and they're joined together so tightly that they don't move. That's immovable. Another one will be your skull. So this is an example here. Another one would be your skull. So your skull bones are connected together. They're going to be sutures that are going to be there, but obviously your skull bones, they don't move. They're considered to be synarthrosis or immovable joints. And then we have amphiarthrosis. Those are slightly movable. So this is called amph. The word amphi means it refers to the term amphibian. I don't know if you remember that from general bio, but amphibian has a dual life. They live in water and they also live in land. So the word amph means dual. It means dual. So in this case, they're going to be partly immovable. So they're slightly movable. And they fall in the middle. So we have one more category that's coming up. So they kind of fall in the middle. And they're partly pretty movable. They fall in the middle. They're going to be considered slightly movable. An example of that is your hip, your pelvis. You've got a joint that is found between your left and right coxal bone. This one is a little bit movable, especially in a woman, because during childbirth, there needs to be a little bit of flexibility here that allows the head of the baby to go through the birth canal. Other places where you might find these would be between the fibula and the tibia. So between the fibula and tibia here. So between these two bones right here. So that's an example. So if you were to eat chicken wings, if you notice chicken wings, there are two bones, and those two bones are connected together using fiber, so they're considered to be amphiarthrosis joint. So don't confuse these two types because they're based on the structure, the previous one, and these are based on the movement. And then we have a third one here, which is called diarthrosis. That means fairly movable. So this one is, again, the word di, we've seen that before, it means two. So di means two. That means this is referring to two separate bones. In this case, two bones are connected and they're separated. Means they're freely movable. An example is the knee bone. So the knee, in your knee, you got this bone down here, which is your tibia, and then your upper leg bone, and then they're held together with the ACL ligament. That's a very famous anterior cruciate ligament. So those are going to be freely movable. And because they are two separate bones that are connected through the middle using a ligament. So those are three types of classifications. These are based on diarthrosis. This is another one that's also diarthrosis. Now I refer to this one for amphiarthrosis as well, but I was talking about kind of a joint that's found here. I'll mention it later again. Versus this is talking about the movement between basically your ankle bones, the range of motion that you have there. So let's go on the list. There's four kinds of joints based on structure. So the first one is called bony fusion. And bony fusion is because two bones come together, they fuse together, and then they disappear, meaning the lines disappear. So bony fusion is not going to be this guy or this guy. It's going to be this guy right here, the frontal suture that disappears. So the line that's still there on the baby skull, you can see that's called frontal suture. Frontal suture because once the frontal suture disappears, you don't see the line anymore, and the frontal bones, they are going to actually become one bone. So they're technically two bones that are fused together, and that's why they're called bony fusion. The other place where you find bony fusion is going to be in your growth plate, epiphyseal lines. So that's the growth plate here, the epiphyseal line. So when you're growing, remember you have you have a growth plate, and this is considered to be a joint because it's separating the epiphysis from the metaphysis. So as you get older, the cartilage goes away. There's cartilage that's found here, and as it goes away, it becomes a line. And the line is immovable. This is considered to be a bony fusion. Eventually, the line goes away because lifetime of a, during the lifetime of a bone, it's the calcium is being taken away, it's being put back, taken away, being put back. So the line gets obliterated, and you don't see it anymore, and you can see that this becomes a bony fusion. And then at the same time, bony fusion is going to be synarthrosis because it's immovable. So the definition's there. Next one is going to be fibrosis. Fibrosis one is going to have fibers that cross between the two bones. And these fibrosis joint are also going to be immovable. So these are the sutures and gumphoses. This is between the teeth and jaw. So you got fibers that go from the tooth to wherever it is connected, and that's what holds it in place. This one is called immovable. A suture is also immovable. You have fibers that cross between two bones like that. And this one is gumphoses, holding your teeth. So that's going to be the line that's, if it's not visible, then it's considered a bony fusion. And if it's visible, then it's considered a suture. So the suture and gumphoses are going to be examples of fibrosis joints. And gumphoses is a specific one that refers to tooth, and the word gumphoses comes from Latin Greek. So the word gumphoses comes from Latin Greek, and I just looked up the term. It means bolt. So basically, it's used to describe how the tooth is bolted in there and doesn't move. It's immovable. So obviously over here, the structure is going to be gumphoses and sutures that are immovable. But you have another category in fibrosis joints that's slightly movable. So you have structural category, that's fibrosis, and then the movement classification is synarthrosis here. and then amphiarthrosis, slightly movable. And then under slightly movable, it says distal articulation between tibia and fibula. So this is the one I was referring to on the previous picture. So it was difficult to see, but this is slightly movable. So if you go ahead and tap your toes left and right, you can try doing that right now. Tap them left and right. And then that's going to move the joint in your tibia and in your ankle. So that's going to be slightly movable. So the big key point here is that movement classification doesn't always follow all of the structure classifications. Some of the structure classifications can go into two different movement categories. That's really important. They kind of separate these two, and it looks like your tibia is on your fibula is on the lateral side, so that's going to be the big bump on the outside of your ankle, and then you see that these fibers kind of cross and between here, and that's what allows you to tap your toes left to right. Next one is going to be cartilaginous, and obviously all of these categories are going to, so all of these are going to have cartilage that's going to be found between two bones, and the movable ones are going to be found in places between your ribs. You're able to take deep breaths because your ribs are connected to the sternum using cartilage. Right here, you can see that. And also your sternum. So that allows for a lot of movement in the thoracic cavity. You're able to bend down, lean laterally. And so right here, it's found between the vertebrae as well. So it helps you kind of get mobile. And the term for mobile is going to be diarthrosis. Hopefully you remember that. And that's going to be highly movable. And on the other hand, you got some that are going to be slightly movable. So again, the term for that was arthrosis. Sorry, amphiarthrosis. This was diarthrosis, and this is amphibian. They're like dual, so slightly movable. And this is going to be slightly movable, and that articulations between the vertebral bodies right here. So they're slightly movable. And I think I should put a third category here that's immovable, because the growth plate here is not movable, it's immovable. These are movable, and these are slightly movable. So maybe I can write that here. Which is synarthrosis. Hopefully you remember that. I was trying to move this, but I can't, I think. So I apologize. It kind of wrote over the bone, but it's saying growth plate is immovable. So what this is showing is that one category is cartilaginous joints as a structural class, and there are going to be three types of movement categories here. Movable, which is the articulation. Example is articulation between the first two ribs and the sternum here. And another one is going to be slightly movable, amphiarthrosis, articulations between the vertebral bodies right here. And then synarthrosis, which is the growth plate, and it's not movable, it's immovable. So an example of that would be the discs between the vertebrae. So that's basically cushioning one bone from the next one. So during injuries, you can have a slip disc, because that's going to be called a hernia. This is a herniated disc. So if it's a kind of a push, if you kind of maybe pick up things incorrectly, you can go ahead and actually squeeze the little disc out of the vertebrae. It has cartilage. The cartilage can push against the nerve here and cause lots of back pain. So please lift your heavy objects correctly. So this is an example of cartilaginous joint, which is structural category, and then this falls under amphiarthrosis. The next category is going to be something called synovial. So this one I'm going to start a new video on. So far we covered 3 types. So let me go back just to kind of remind you. So we have these 4 classifications of joints: bony fusion, which we covered; fibrosis, those are the fibers going between the bones, like sutures; cartilaginous, that's cartilage found between the bones; and then the last one is synovial, which I'm going to cover in the next video. So bony fusion, fibrosis, and cartilaginous, and synovial 4 classifications, structural classifications, and then we have 3 movement classifications of the joints. And next video will cover the synovial, which is the 4th structural category.